Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. I never thought of myself as a suspicious man. Trust was the cornerstone of my relationship with Claire. We met in college, a whirlwind romance that turned into a marriage shortly after graduation. Life moved quickly, careers, a modest house in the suburbs, and 2 kids who became the center of our universe. Claire worked part-time in marketing while I dedicated long hours to my IT job to ensure we lived comfortably. She had more freedom than I did, but I never begrudged her that. At least, not until the cracks in our foundation started to show. It was a text message that set everything into motion. One night, as I wrapped up a work project, Claire's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She was in the bathroom, and the screen lit up with a preview. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, babe." My chest tightened. The sender's name was Nate. My mind raced to connect dots that didn't exist. Who was Nate? Why was he calling her, babe? I told myself it had to be innocent, maybe a misdirected message or a casual nickname. I didn't want to believe anything else. When Claire returned from the bathroom, I pretended nothing was wrong. We exchanged a few words, and she climbed into bed, her back turned to me. I stared at the ceiling, trying to drown out the pounding in my chest. Sleep was impossible. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek as usual before leaving for work, her purse slung over her shoulder. As the door closed behind her, I realized that I couldn't ignore what I saw. My instincts screamed at me to dig deeper, even if it meant uncovering something I didn't want to know. Later that day, I started small. I checked her phone bill, something I'd never done before. Claire and I shared an account, so accessing it wasn't difficult. What I found shook me. There were dozens of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize. They spanned months, some in the early morning hours, others late at night. The number was saved in her contacts as Nate. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I let my anger simmer, fueling my determination to uncover the truth. Over the next few days, I monitored her behavior. She was on her phone constantly, smiling at messages she never shared with me. She started working late more often, claiming deadlines and last-minute meetings were eating up her evenings. My stomach churned every time she gave me an excuse. One evening, I stayed up late under the pretense of finishing another work project. Claire said she was tired and headed to bed. Before she fell asleep, she took her phone to the bathroom, something she'd never done before. When she returned, she tucked it under her pillow. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. People only guard secrets that need protecting. The following day, I began digging deeper. I scoured our shared credit card statements. There were charges for restaurants I'd never heard of, in neighborhoods Claire never mentioned visiting. There were hotel stays that didn't match any of her alleged business trips. The dots were connecting too neatly, painting a picture I didn't want to see. By the end of the week, my heart was heavy with the weight of my suspicions. But suspicions weren't enough, I needed proof. That Saturday, Claire mentioned she had a weekend work trip to finalize a client's project. She left early that morning, her suitcase packed with what she claimed were work essentials. I kissed her goodbye, feigning normalcy, and watched her drive away. The moment she was out of sight, I grabbed the GPS tracker I had purchased earlier in the week. I had attached it discreetly to her car when she wasn't looking. Pulling up the app on my phone, I saw her path clearly. Instead of heading toward her office or a client's location, she was driving west, out of town. I spent the day glued to the tracker, watching as she arrived at a quaint bed and breakfast 2 towns over. My stomach churned. I zoomed in on the location, noting the small inn's name and address. It wasn't just any lodging, it was the kind of place couples went for romance, not business. I sat in silence, the enormity of it all sinking in. My wife wasn't just lying to me, she was betraying me. Yet, instead of confronting her, I felt an eerie calm. My mind shifted from heartbreak to strategy. If she thought she could deceive me, she was going to learn just how wrong she was. That night, I drove to the bed and breakfast, parking discreetly down the street. I didn't go in. Instead, I waited in the shadows, watching. Around 8 p.m., she emerged, hand in hand with a man I presumed was Nate. They strolled to a nearby restaurant, laughing and leaning into each other as though they didn't have a care in the world. The sight made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. This wasn't the time to make a scene. I pulled out my camera and snapped several photos, ensuring I captured every detail. Claire's betrayal was now documented. By the time I returned home, my plan was solidifying. This wasn't just about confronting her, it was about ensuring she faced the consequences of her actions. I wasn't just going to end the marriage. I was going to end it on my terms, leaving no room for her to twist the narrative. As I sat at the dining table that night, staring at the photos on my phone, I realized there was no going back. Claire had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. Sunday evening came faster than I expected. I knew Claire would return home soon, her weekend of lies and betrayal neatly tucked behind a veil of fabricated meetings and client emergencies. I spent the afternoon preparing, not for an argument, but for the confrontation that would shatter the illusion she thought she controlled. When her car finally pulled into the driveway, I felt an odd mix of anticipation and dread. She stepped inside, looking slightly disheveled but masking it with a practiced smile. Her suitcase rolled in behind her. "Hey, honey," she said casually, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my face slightly, letting her kiss land awkwardly on my cheek. She froze for a moment, then recovered quickly. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "How was your trip?" Her eyes flickered with a hint of hesitation. "Busy, exhausting. You know how these things are." She laughed nervously, slipping into the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. I followed her, leaning against the counter, watching her every move. "Anything interesting happen?" I asked, feigning casual interest. She sipped her water, her back to me. "Not really. Just the usual meetings and late nights. I'm glad to be home, though." I felt a surge of anger but kept my expression neutral. "Good. You must be tired." She turned to face me, her smile tight. "Yeah. I think I'll take a shower and turn in early." "Before you do," I said, stepping closer, "I need to talk to you about something." Her face faltered. She glanced at her watch, then back at me. "Now? Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm really wiped out." "No," I said firmly. "It can't." The weight of my voice stopped her mid-step. She turned fully toward me, setting her glass down on the counter. "What's going on?" I walked over to the dining table where I had prepared a folder. Inside were the photos I had taken, screenshots of her text exchanges with Nate, and the credit card statements highlighting her secret expenses. I slid the folder across the table toward her. "Why don't you tell me?" I said, my voice cold. Claire's expression shifted from confusion to panic as she opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the contents, her face growing paler with each page. By the time she looked up at me, tears were already forming in her eyes. Dave. "I can explain," she stammered. I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm sure you can. I'd love to hear how you explain sneaking off to a bed and breakfast with Nate, spending our money on dinners and hotels while pretending to be on work trips." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she managed to speak. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I snapped. "Because it looks like you've been lying to me, Claire. 4 months. Maybe longer. How long has this been going on?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's not like that, Dave. I swear. I didn't mean for this to happen." I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. Then what the hell did you mean for it to be? A mistake? A fling? Tell me. Her sobs grew louder. It started, a few months ago. He's just a friend. A friend? I barked. Friends don't spend weekends together in romantic inns, Claire. Friends don't send each other messages like, "Can't wait to taste you." I threw the printed screenshot of the message onto the table. Claire buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I was lonely, she choked out. You're always working late, always distracted. I felt invisible. I stepped back, the sheer audacity of her words hitting me like a freight train. You felt invisible. So your solution was to have an affair? To betray everything we built? It wasn't like that, she pleaded, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. I needed something. My voice dropped, cold and measured. What about what I needed, Claire? I needed a wife who was honest, loyal. Someone who wouldn't destroy our family for a cheap thrill. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and desperate. Please, Dave. Don't do this. Don't let this ruin us. We can fix it. We can go to counseling, talk to someone. I'll end it with Nate. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head, disgusted. You already ruined us, Claire. You made your choice. Now, I'm making mine. Her sobs turned into wails as she realized what I meant. No, please. Don't throw everything away. Think about the kids, about everything we've been through. I stared at her, feeling a strange numbness wash over me. I already have. You should start packing. I want you out of this house by the end of the week. Her cries filled the room, but I didn't waver. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her to grapple with the reality of her actions. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I felt a mix of heartbreak and satisfaction. Claire had shattered the life we built, but now it was her turn to feel the weight of it. I had only just begun. The revenge I planned wasn't about petty payback. It was about ensuring she understood the full gravity of what she had done. She thought she could walk away from this unscathed. She was wrong. The house was eerily quiet the next morning. Claire had spent the night in the guest room, her sobs muffled through the walls. I hadn't slept much either, but not because of regret. My mind was already spinning with the next steps, calculating every move like a game of chess. This wasn't just about ending our marriage, it was about making sure she felt the weight of her betrayal at every turn. By the time the kids woke up, I was already in the kitchen making breakfast. Claire emerged shortly after, her eyes swollen and red. She tried to force a smile for the kids, but they were too young to notice the tension. I kept my demeanor calm, neutral, as if nothing had changed. For their sake, I played the role of the dutiful husband and father one last time. After breakfast, Claire pulled me aside. Dave, please, can we talk? I glanced at the kids in the living room, then back at her. Fine. Upstairs. We retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind us. Claire stood near the window, wringing her hands. I know I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We've been through so much together. Please don't throw it all away. I crossed my arms, leaning against the dresser. You're right, Claire. We've been through a lot. That's what makes this so much worse. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our kids, our family. How am I supposed to forgive that? Her tears started again, streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll cut Nate out of my life. I'll go to therapy. Please, just give me a chance to prove to you that I'm still the woman you married. I shook my head, my voice cold. That woman is gone. The Claire I married would never have done this. You destroyed her the moment you decided to cheat. Her sobs grew louder, and she sank to the bed, burying her face in her hands. I felt a pang of something, pity, maybe, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for softness. "I'm filing for divorce," I said flatly. "You need to start looking for somewhere else to live. The kids will stay here with me. You can have visitation, but I won't let them be uprooted because of your selfishness." She looked up at me, her face a mix of despair and anger. "You're not serious. You can't just take the kids away from me." "I can, and I will," I said firmly. "A judge isn't going to side with someone who used work trips as an excuse to cheat. I've got all the evidence I need to prove what you've been doing." Her expression changed, desperation giving way to fury. "So that's it? You're just going to throw me out and act like I don't exist anymore? After everything we've been through?" I leaned in closer, my voice low and steady. "You made your bed, Claire. Now you get to lie in it." The rest of the week was tense but manageable. Claire spent most of her time packing and trying to put on a brave face for the kids. I didn't tell them anything yet. I wanted to wait until the papers were filed and the arrangements finalized. It wasn't fair to involve them until it was absolutely necessary. I wasn't done with her yet, though. The confrontation was just the first move in my plan. The real impact would come at the anniversary party we had planned months ago, scheduled for the following weekend. It was supposed to be a celebration of our marriage, a chance to gather with friends and family. Instead, it would be the stage for the ultimate reveal. The day of the party arrived, and Claire was still in the house. She had begged me to let her stay until she could finalize her living arrangements, and I had agreed, not out of kindness, but because it fit my plans. She spent the morning trying to act normal, decorating the living room and preparing appetizers. I let her go through the motions, knowing she had no idea what was coming. By the time the guests arrived, the house was buzzing with conversation and laughter. Friends and family mingled, toasting to what they thought was another year of wedded bliss. Claire flitted around the room, smiling and chatting like everything was fine. Nate wasn't there, thankfully, but I had no doubt he'd hear about what happened soon enough. When the time came for speeches, I stood in the center of the room, raising my glass. Claire stood beside me, her smile faltering slightly as she noticed my serious expression. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "Claire and I are so grateful to have such amazing friends and family in our lives. We've shared so many wonderful memories together, and today is no different." The room erupted in applause, but I held up a hand to quiet them. "But before we go any further, there's something I need to say. Something that's been weighing on me for some time." Claire's smile disappeared entirely. She glanced at me, her face pale, but I kept going. "For the past year, Claire has been lying to me," I said, my voice steady. "She's been using work trips as an excuse to spend time with another man. While I was working late to provide for our family, she was sneaking off to romantic getaways with her affair partner." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as Claire's face turned beet red. "Dave," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" I ignored her, addressing the crowd. I didn't want to believe it at first. I thought I was imagining things, overreacting. But the evidence was undeniable. And now, I think it's only fair that everyone here knows the truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photos I had taken, holding them up for everyone to see. Claire's face was frozen in horror, her mouth moving soundlessly as the room erupted in whispers. "Claire made her choice," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And now I'm making mine. This marriage is over." With that, I set my glass down and walked out of the room, leaving Claire to face the fallout alone. The sound of voices, gasps, and hurried footsteps followed me, but I didn't look back. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. My chest felt heavy, my mind swirling with emotions I couldn't name. Revenge wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be, but it was necessary. Claire had betrayed me, and now she had to live with the consequences. As I drove away, I realized this was just the beginning. There was still so much to rebuild: my life, my trust, my future. But one thing was certain: I would never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. The anniversary party became a tale of legend among our friends and family. Some called it brave, others thought it cruel, but none of them could forget the moment I laid everything bare. By the time I returned home later that night, the house was dark and silent. Claire's car was gone, and so were most of her belongings. She'd left a note on the counter: "I'm sorry." I crumpled it without reading further. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I filed for divorce, officially got custody of the kids, and started piecing my life back together. Claire moved into a small apartment in a less familiar part of town, and I kept my distance, communicating only about the children. She seemed broken, her bright personality dimmed to something dull and subdued. But I didn't care. She deserved it. Or so I thought. The revenge had felt cathartic in the moment, but the satisfaction was fleeting. Each time I looked into my kids' faces, I saw the confusion and hurt they were too young to articulate. They didn't understand why their mother was suddenly gone, why everything they'd known had changed so drastically. They didn't need to know the full story, but their innocent questions: "Why doesn't mommy live here anymore?" were knives to my heart. Weeks turned into months, and the sharp edges of my anger began to dull. Life settled into a rhythm, but it was a hollow one. My focus became the kids and work. Nights were quiet, the house echoing with an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. Even with Claire gone, her absence was a heavy presence, a reminder of everything that had been lost. Then, one day, I got a call from Claire's sister, Hannah. I hadn't spoken to her since the party, and her voice was heavy with worry. "Dave, have you heard from Claire?" she asked. I frowned, glancing at the clock. "Not recently." "Why?" "She's not answering her phone," Hannah said. "She missed work today, and she hasn't been home. I'm really worried about her." Despite myself, a pang of concern hit me. "Have you called her friends? Maybe she's with someone." Hannah hesitated. "She doesn't really have anyone anymore, Dave. Not since, well, everything that happened." Guilt clawed at me, but I pushed it aside. "I'll try calling her," I said. "Let me know if you hear anything." I hung up and stared at my phone, debating whether to reach out. Part of me didn't want to: after all, she had caused this mess. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good years, couldn't shake the worry. I dialed her number. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Still nothing. My chest tightened with unease. That evening, I got another call, this time from the police. They had found Claire's car parked near a quiet stretch of river outside town. Inside, they discovered a letter addressed to me. I drove to the station, my hands trembling on the wheel. When I arrived, an officer handed me the envelope, his expression somber. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. The words didn't register. My hands shook as I opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of paper. Claire's handwriting stared back at me. "Dave. I don't know how to make you understand how sorry I am. I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back, and I'll carry that regret with me forever. But I've lost everything: our family, our home, even myself. I thought I could handle the consequences of my actions, but I can't. I've become a ghost, haunting the edges of my own life, and it's too much. Please tell the kids I love them. Please don't let them hate me. I hope one day you'll find peace, even if I couldn't. Claire." The letter slipped from my hands, fluttering to the floor. My legs gave out, and I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. The room spun, the officer's voice a distant hum as he explained that her body had been found in the river. The details blurred together, but one thing was clear: Claire was gone. In the days that followed, I moved through life in a daze. The guilt I'd pushed aside now consumed me. Every memory of the party, of the way I had exposed her, felt like a dagger to my soul. I had wanted justice, revenge, but I never wanted this. The kids were devastated. I tried to be strong for them, but every time they asked about their mother, the weight of my choices crushed me. I had been so focused on punishing Claire that I hadn't stopped to consider what it might cost her, or us. One night, as I tucked my youngest into bed, she looked up at me with tearful eyes. "Daddy, was it my fault Mommy left?" The question shattered me. I pulled her close, choking back tears. "No, sweetheart. It wasn't your fault. Mommy loved you very much." But as I held her, I couldn't help but wonder if it was my fault. If I had handled things differently, would Claire still be here? Would our family still be whole? Revenge had seemed so sweet in the beginning. Now, it was a bitter taste I couldn't wash away. And no matter how much time passed, I knew the scars of that night, of my choices, her choices, would never fully heal.